In the previous chapter, you learned about tenses. Now we're going to learn about moods. Not those kind of moods, but linguistic ones. Well, I would suggest you bookmark page 252 in Duff, which gives you a chart on parsing verbs and working through the different options you've got. You need to think about verbs in terms of their person, first, second or third. And then their number, singular or plural. And then their tense, present, future, imperfect, aorist. And then their voice, which I'm not going to worry about now because that's the next chapter. And then their mood, and that's what we're going to look at this chapter. So far, you've looked at tenses. And you've got examples of the 4 tenses on the screen as a quick revision. Luor, no markers, present. Eluez, the epsilon augment, imperfect. Luce, the sigma suffix, future. And lu samen, both the markers, aorist. Looking for those markers is going to be really helpful in Greek. What we can think of with these, however, is what person and number are they? So we've got the tenses there. You've got first singular. You've got first plural. You've got second singular. And you've got third singular. So that's how much parsing you've done so far. We're now moving on to think about moods. What are these? In summary, indicative is the normal. It's what you use. It's what you use to indicate things. This is luo. We have imperatives. This is how you give an order. Infinitives, often translated as to do something. Participles and subjunctives. Participles are the English equivalent of ing or ed words. We'll look at those more later on in this video. And the subjunctive is often described as a hypothetical mood or mood of potentiality. You'll see more in chapter 17. That's what Duff summarises. I'm going to add one more, and that's the optative. It is a mood. It's used very infrequently in the New Testament. Duff does cover it, but not until chapter 20. In fact, it's the very last thing you need to do in this book. So there are 6 moods to think about. You've so far covered luor, the indicative. This chapter is going to think about 3 more. We'll cover imperative and infinitive in the first part, and then move on to participles. So, the imperatives. In English, we have very few options. Get up. Shut up. Open the door. Sit down. Get me a book. It's any of those commands that you might commonly see marked with an exclamation mark. In Greek, you do have a difference. I've put Forrest Gump up here because I think he's the best explanation. Run, Forrest, run. Forrest Gump becomes a champion runner because nobody ever told him to stop running. They said run, they didn't say when to stop. The imperative in English is a little bit vague. It doesn't tell you whether to do something once or to carry on doing it. If I say open the door, I don't mean keep opening and shutting it until I tell you to stop. If I say be good, I probably mean be good for a long time. There are 2 different ways of giving orders, but we don't differentiate in English. Greek does, and this is where what we call aspect becomes important. And Greek cares a lot about aspect, and this is the difference between the present and the aorist in Greek. The present is probably the continuous type. It's the be good and continue being good. The aorist is labelled often as simple or default. And it might be thought as don't start. There is research still going on in this. Some people say it's don't start doing something. Some people say it's a one-off action. Anything that is less bounded than the present is very much more about being unbounded, is going to fall into the aorist. Run, Forest, run. Is he being told to run in an aorist sense, or is he being told to run in a present sense? It's really an aorist sense. Get up, that's aorist. It's a one-off thing. Shut up, that's probably an aorist thing, because I mean right this moment. I don't mean never talk again. So the majority of commands we give actually fall under the aorist. This is by far the most useful part of the imperative. Greek differentiates then between how you're telling someone to do, the aspect, and between how many people you're telling to do it. So you need 4 sets of endings at this point. The present, lue, luete. Now, slightly frustrating, this is the same as the indicative, so you're going to need context to tell you it's an imperative. Context might include being in speech, being in a short phrase, being at the start of a sentence, things that make things look like a command rather than a general statement. The aorist no longer has an augment, because the augment, if you remember from chapter 6, is a marker of past tense. We're now not looking at a marker of past tense. The aorist is functioning as a simple aspect. So the aorist is both a tense and not a tense. When it's got an E, it's a simple past. When it hasn't got an E, it's about being default, simple, one-off, depends on the mood exactly how you're going to interpret it. So there is no augment on the aorist imperative. What there is still a sigma. And then the endings luson and lusate. Lusate is the same ending as the indicative, but because there's no augment, you can't mix them up. So that makes life a little bit simpler for you. Luson is a different ending in its own right, but see if you can remember the phrase Kyrie eleison, which in English letters would be written Kyrie eleison, which means Lord have mercy, and is part of worship. So if you can remember the phrase Kyrie eleison, or know it anyway, then you'll remember your aorist imperative, which is going to be a really important part of the verb for you. So that's the form, and I've talked a little bit about the difference in the meaning already. If you want to look at what Duff says about that, have a look at page 81 in the textbook. The other thing to bear in mind is if you want to negate these, then you now need to use me and not u. So all those words beginning with u now become words beginning with me. And if you have a look in the vocab at the end of this chapter, you'll see on page 88 that you now have me, merde, merkati, merte as equivalents to u, ude, uketi, ute. So you've got the same words but with me now instead of u. The next thing is the infinitive. The basic idea of this is often called a kind of default part of the verb. In English, it's what you look up in a dictionary. And it's often described as to do something. The infinitives are fairly straightforward in form. The present one, luane. The aorist one still has a sigma in it, still doesn't have an augment, and then alpha iota. What's the difference? The present is continuous or repeated, and the aorist is simple or default. I want to go to the bank today. That to go is probably a simple idea because I'm not expressing an idea to wanting to go to the bank as an ongoing process. the majority of times you use infinitive, it's also going to be in the aorist, because most things you say are going to be bounded in some way. But the present is still useful and does have its place. How do you use them? Actually, very similar to English. So if you find yourself wanting to say to do something in English, the likelihood is you're going to need that in Greek. When we get to chapter 18, we'll look at a much longer list of how to use them. For now, chapter 7, you need to learn what's called the complementary infinitive, which completes a phrase So something like thelo, which means I want or wish, you're going to say I want to do something and need an infinitive after it. So this is where I want to, I need to, I have to, it is important to, I am going to. Any of those phrases in English that start off something that you might want to put to do something in English, you're going to use an infinitive for in Greek.